Hey folks, this is Sean McCormick here, and today I'm going to do a video about textures and using textures. I have a set of textures for sale in the onOne marketplace, which you can see here, and they're called crack, bump and scratch textures. It's basically 12 different textures that I use myself, that I've used for lots of different things. I'm going to show you how to use them in a few minutes, and here's a sample image and we'll show you how I did that one as well. So each of these textures is 4000 pixels long at 300 ppi, and they're basically $12 for 12, and they're high-res images. So essentially, you're getting a high-res image for $1 each, which is great value in my opinion. Because if you were going from microstock sites, you wouldn't be buying images that cheap. So let's actually jump into using them. So I'm just going to jump across to Lightroom. Okay, so here we have 3 images and 2 of the textures. Just to show you what you can do with them very, very quickly. So I'm going to start off with the original image that we saw on the site, and then I'm going to hold down my command key or control key if you're on PC to select the second image, which is our texture, and then we're going to go to Photo, Edit In, and then Open as Layers in Photoshop. Now I'm using the release candidate of Lightroom 4.2, so that expects to see Adobe Camera Raw 7.2, which I don't have installed. This is because on Mac it's supposed to install alongside your original 4.1 install, but it doesn't, it overwrites it. So I haven't actually installed 7.2 yet. So I'm going to click open anyway, because there's no feature changes between 7.1 and 7.2 anyway. So these are now going to open as layers, and that takes a little bit of time, so we'll just come back to that. Okay, so our layers have now opened. This looks a little bit fuzzy because we're at kind of an odd size here, which is 28.04. So I'm just going to hold down the command key and press minus, or the control key if you're on PC. And you can see the image sharpens up a lot. This is because when you're at a multiplier like 25, 33, 50, it makes for much smoother. When you're at those kind of percentages, what it's doing is interpolating and it doesn't look as sharp. So just a little aside. So our texture layer is on the bottom, so we need to select it and then drag it up to the top. So drag it up to the top, and making sure our layer is selected, I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform. You can also use the shortcut Command T or Control T on PC. So now I'm literally just going to drag the image across, and when I'm done, you can click the tick box or press Enter to accept. So that's great, we're done. No, not really. What we're going to do is we're going to change the blending mode. And you change the blending mode in the layers panel. So generally speaking, when you're dealing with textures, you would use multiply, which we can see as a darkening effect there, or you would use overlay or soft light. These are the ones you're most likely to use. There is a little trick if you're in move. If you hold the shift key and you go use the plus and minus, what it does is it lets you go through all of the blend modes one at a time. As you can see here, most of them don't do a whole heap and aren't very good. Multiply is okay, darken isn't great, dissolve is doing nothing, normal does nothing, luminosity. So the ones that I've already suggested are multiply, overlay and soft light. Now I actually like what overlay is doing here. I think it's slightly strong, so I'd probably bring back the opacity, and that would be it. Another thing is, let's say I have the texture here and I don't like this bit of the texture. Well, I could actually clone it out, or what I could do is I could put it into a darker part of the image where it's not going to be as visible. So again, I can go to Transform, Edit. Sorry, we're not actually selecting a layer, so you have to have a layer selected. Free Transform. We can do is horizontal. We can just in the H we can go minus, and that'll flip it. So it's flipped it down here. Okay, and put it outside. Now it's brought in another little bit, but that's okay. I don't mind that one so much. And again, press return to enter. And again, if I'm not happy with that, J. There's a couple of things you can do here. Apple T again, you can stretch it and just pull it out of the image, or you can just clone it. So we're just going to actually stretch it out altogether there. Another thing is that this is colored in the image. We may not want it to be colored. because it's adding color to the sky. We may only want it to add texture, in which case what we can do is you can create a new adjustment layer. So we click on the adjustment layer, which is this circle that's split between black and white, and we can click hue saturation, and then we can desaturate to remove color. Now that's removed color in the whole image, but what we can do is we can clip the hue saturation to the underlying layer, and we do that by holding down the Alt key or the Option key. We can see that the cursor has changed to this little icon as we hover over the gap between the two layers. It means that it's clipping. Now if you're in CS4 or CS5 and older versions of Photoshop, what you see is you see two circles that are interconnecting, if that means the same thing. So just click. So now it's clipped the desaturation to the layer below, which is our texture layer, so it's now removed the color from the texture. So if we go to the history panel, what we can do is, if we go kind of backwards and forwards before, and that's after, so you can see it's a slightly different look for it. So that would be one method of using textures. Now I'm going to show you using the same texture on a different file, just to give you an idea of using it on that. I'm not going to save these in this case, because I've already done that before. So we're going to jump back, and we're going to start off with this image and the same texture again. You can use any of the other textures as well. Same story, photo, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. We'll open up in Photoshop again, and again I'm going to zoom out, which is Command minus or Control minus, and I need to bring my texture layer back on top. And again I'm going to go Apple to or Command T for a free transform. Drag it across. Again I'm just going to bring those bits out of sight. Press return to accept, and here I'm just going to go straight for an overlay. Okay, I like what that's done again. And exactly the same as before, I'm going to go and create an adjustment layer, desaturate adjustment layer, and again we need to clip it, holding down the Alt key, clip in between them. I really like what that's done there. It's kind of giving it a real old time feel. I'm just going to pull back the saturation ever so slightly. Another thing is, if you want to increase the effect, you could also add a curves adjustment layer, and again you need to clip it down. And by changing the actual contrast in it, you can change the effect that your texture is having on the image. So that's another thing you can do with textures as well. Let's say I find that it's too strong here on this section of the image, and I actually want to bring a little bit of this back. What I can do is I can come down to my texture layer, I can click on this layer mask icon, which is giving me a white layer. That means everything is visible. If we go to the brush tool, with a black brush and the opacity set to about 20%, and you can press the number keys as well if you're out of the actual thing. So if I press 2 it goes to 20, 3 will go to 30, so 20%. And now we're just going to brush along the mountains themselves. Should be using a softer brush, so if I hold down the shift key and the square brackets, it'll make the brush softer. So what I can do is I can then just remove the effect of the texture ever so lightly from the mountains. So that's another thing you can do. You can affect areas as well. So we create a little bit of a mask to try and help that. Now you could do it much stronger, or you could keep painting it, but that's just another set of tools that you can use with textures. Again, I'm not going to save these. Don't save. I'm just going to jump back. Now the next thing I'm going to do is slightly more complex. So I'm going to take a shot of a person with a grey background and a texture. So if this texture was rotated, it's better to have them in the same orientation. So in this case, the original texture might have been more like that. So then you need to rotate it, just to let you know that they really need to be the same orientation. It's just when you open as layers, what will happen is if you've got a wide layer and you have a narrow layer, you'll end up essentially with kind of a square file that needs to be cropped. So it's just better to have them the same size starting off, and then it'll just basically, the size of the file will be the same size as the largest image you're bringing in. So photo, edit in, again, open as layers in Photoshop. . Okay, so the files are open again. Same story as before. Need to drag our texture up on top. Command T or Control T for free transform. Return to enter our move. And again, we need to change our blend mode. Now for backgrounds, when I'm applying to backgrounds, I generally go with multiply because it adds to the background layer. Now it doesn't look like it's affecting it the way I want, but that's because we're seeing it over the person as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the texture layer for now. And I'm going to create a mask around the person. So I'm going to make a selection around the person and then apply that selection to the actual texture. You don't need to be as accurate with this mask as you would if you were doing a cutout, because it's going to get blended into the edges anyway. But I mean, you do need it to be reasonably accurate. You could hand paint this and it would be enough, but this way it's a little bit more accurate than hand painting. So go for the quick selection tool, and the quick selection tool is automatically in this add mode, and I generally start off with around a 6 pixel brush. The quick selection tool is pretty intense in terms of time consumption and stuff like that, so you can see that it's not following very well. So I'm going to let it go as far as there, and then you can either click on the minus brush here, or you can hold down the Alt or Option key, which is easier. So I'm just going to paint back over the hair which has become selected, and I don't want it to be selected in this case. So, and all these areas of the face, I don't want them to be selected either, so I'm just going to go over them. Okay. And now back down the body. So when I let go of Alt, it will switch again to the add to the selection. Now, like I say, it is very processor intensive, so sometimes you will have little waits with the quick selection tool. It's also one of those things where it has to write out to the disk a lot. So now we're just going to draw down the rest of the body, down to the bottom. Okay, and now again I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key to bring in more hair. And I'm just looking, I need to bring in this finger again. So I'll bring in the finger. And then I also need to add selection inside the arm. Let's not forget inside the arms. And the same the other side. Okay. So that's a rough selection, and like I say, it's not as important with this one as it would be for if you're doing a cutout. But we're still going to go to refine edge to refine the edge. So I'm going to use edge detection. I'm going to set it around 10 to 15 pixels. Okay, that's reasonably okay. And I'm going to click Smart Radius, so it'll try and guess where it needs to be harder or where it needs to be softer. And then we have the brush selected, so I'm literally going to brush in areas where I want additional stuff to be selected. So just around these edges of the hair. So I'm just literally painting around them to try and get them included. So that'll try and detect them. Okay, so that's not too bad. So now I'm going to click, this is going to go to a selection, so I click OK. And then what I do is I'm going to select my texture layer. I'll come down to the layer mask icon. So that looks pretty good. So let's zoom in, which is the Command plus or Control plus. So zoom in and look around the edges. You can see, even though that the hair isn't fully selected or wasn't fully selected, that where it actually blends in, it actually doesn't matter. It looks like, oh, that's just the light shining through. If you look along hard edges, like along the hair of the arms and stuff, it looks fine. It's more than acceptable, but it's much quicker and more accurate than hand painting. Okay, I'll zoom back out really quickly. So what I've done there basically is I've given a bare grey wall a little bit more of a better look. So textures are really good for that kind of a thing. So jumping back and have a look at that. So some of those textures are there. There's other ones like heavy cracks, lots of scratches. I really like the scratching one. There's bumps, which can give kind of a mottled paper effect. I quite like them and use them. I've used them on lots of stuff. I've won a couple of gold awards with the SWPP with them, and some highly commended. So I do use these ones myself. These are my favorite textures. So again, you can go to the onOne marketplace, and you can also use code L or Sean. That's L or SEAN to get 15% off. This applies to the whole onOne store as well. Okay, so thanks for looking, and obviously these techniques work for any texture and stuff like that, but I'm just using my own textures to show you how to do those. There are people that are selling videos on how to use textures, and like a fortune. I've seen as much as $400 for a video on how to use textures, and then supplying some of the textures as well that go with it. So I think $12 is very, very, very cheap in comparison. I've been Sean McCormick. Thanks for watching.